Welcome to the Non-Obvious Diversity Summit. I am your host, Rohit Bhargava, and I am excited to introduce my co-author and my very good friend, Henry Coutinho-Mason, for this conversation about futurists, futurism, and what we should be ready for in the new world. Henry, how are you?
Great to meet you. Good to see you again, Rohit.
Yeah, good to see you and meet you, my friend. You have a fantastic panel set, and I don't want to stand in the way of getting you started with that. So I will hand over to you and let you take it away.
You're super excited to be joined here today by three of the most exciting emerging futurists, trend watchers, innovation scouts that I know and that I've worked with over the past few years. As I was running TrendWatching for the last decade. So I've worked with a bunch of futurists from all over the world. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be hosting this panel, and when Rohit reached out to me, it's a conversation that we've had a lot internally, is that, you know, there's this tension going on in the world of futurism and in the world of thinking about the future. Because, you know, if we're honest, a lot of the futurists have traditionally looked a lot like myself, not just the black rimmed glasses, but white, male from either the West Coast or certainly the US, or maybe from the Netherlands or Northwest Europe. And, you know, that is a tiny demographic. And of course, if you're thinking about the future, we all know it's not going to be the demographic which is going to shape the future. So I am just so excited to welcome, as I say, three of the most exciting emerging futurists who quite literally represent the future demographic of the global marketplace, the people that are going to be shaping our future. And over the next hour or so, really want to have a chat with them about where they see things headed, their experience of the industry, and how we can make sure the futures, the trends, the innovation industry starts to bring in more inclusive voices so that ultimately we're better placed to understand what's coming next. Because if there's anything that the experience of the last 12, 18 months or so has shown us, it's that we have to be ready for things that, while many people say they're unexpected, unprecedented, the truth is they weren't. There were people out there talking about issues like the prospect of a future pandemic, but were they being heard? And so this is really a conversation about which voices should we be listening to, and who should be driving these conversations about the future, so that we can better head off any unexpected, unprecedented issues. And so with that, let's bring in the panel. Oh, here we go. Firstly, we have Tiffany, then Nathania or Nia, and Lydia. So we'll just go around one by one, and you guys can introduce yourselves and give a little bit about your story, where you're based, because I'm really excited. We're dialing in from all over the world here. And we can kick off with Tiffany, please. Over to you.
Okay, hey guys. So I'm Tiffany. I'm from Hong Kong. I am a millennial. I classify and resonate myself as a Hong Konger, but also of an international citizen, having lived between London and Hong Kong. But I also actually grew up in a British international school all my life, grew up around many cultures, hence my American accent. To be very honest, I grew up quite whitewashed, very out of touch with my Asian culture, but it wasn't until uni that I was very exposed to the local mentality, culture, out of the bubble that I grew up in. And that's really opened up a lot of doors for me. I was more attuned to the different market segments here, the expat community, the locals, different social classes, and that really shaped who I am today as an analyst, being inquisitive and interrogative as well.
Awesome, thank you. And now, Nia, staying in Asia, could you just give the viewers a little bit of background of where you're sitting today and where you come from?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Nathania Christie. You can call me Nia. I'm an Indonesian based in Singapore for the past 12 years. I'm also a millennial. And I think throughout my life, I've actually not been a minority where I'm from, but I think ever since I work at TrendWatching, been in the industry, and then speak at different conferences, I'm more and more exposed to like who I am at a global stage, and I'm often, if not always, either the only female speaker or the only millennial speaker or the only Asian speaker or all of the above. So I think this panel is going to be quite an exciting one, just to talk about our diverse perspective and where we see the future is heading when it comes to this industry.
Awesome, thank you. And Lydia, over to you, because you are, it's not the evening for you, it is early in the morning, because you are currently based in Brazil, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's 8 a.m. here. Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Caldana. I am from Brazil, currently between New York and Sao Paulo because of the pandemic. I have led quite a global life and international life as well, like the others. And I think it wasn't until I was working full-time for many years in Brazil that I realized on a professional level that whichever project that I was working on, whether regardless of the industry, whether it was mobility, health, sports, music, there are things related to gender, race, and class that would make the reality of LATAM very different to projects that I was doing in other places like South Korea, India, etc. And of course, different to the experiences that we have in Europe and the US. So that's kind of where I fell in love with studying and going deeper into what we are looking at in terms of decolonization, privilege, and all the things that we're going to talk about a little bit more later on.
Fantastic. And so, yeah, just, you can hear in the first few minutes the range of experiences, the global nature and diversity that we have on this panel. And so, look, one of the things I always like to do when we're talking about futures thinking, because it can feel so abstract, right? And I think one of the reasons why I love I've worked with all of you in the past. One of the reasons why I love working with you guys is because you're very good at making future thinking and future theory tangible. So Tiffany, back to you. I know you've just published a report on Asian future retail trends for 2021. I'd just love for you guys to share a little bit about, let's really make it concrete for the viewers. Can you tell us a little bit about a trend that you have seen recently, which became very obvious to you because of your positioning, either where you're geographically located, because of your gender, your age? You both spoke about being millennials. That just seemed very obvious to you that perhaps wasn't, or as Rohit would say, was non-obvious to the rest of the world. And share a little bit about how you spotted it, what kind of innovations, what brands you saw jumping on this trend, and then talk about, how it then filtered through to the rest of the world. I'd love to hear some war stories from you all. So Tiffany, over to you first.
Okay, so, well, I could give one of an example. Recently, I did a consultancy project for a fintech bank looking to risk management and governance. And as much as I really want to try avoid bringing politics into the picture, especially with Hong Kong's situation, it's really hard not to, because from 2019 till now has shaped a lot of our consumer behaviors and trends, etc. So one of the things I had noticed was the mass consumers started to switch apps. Like Hong Kongers are very aware, they're very knowledge savvy, they're always educating themselves with fact-checked accounts, something that a lot of global citizens around the world have also started doing ever since people started paying more attention to politics and such, right? So actually a lot of Hong Kong people, they started migrating into more encrypted and private channels, I'd say, like such as Telegram, MeWe, Signal, a lot of this before the recent news. So actually I remember while I was doing the research for this project and looking into what apps that people started using, I asked my friends around, have you started using Signal? Have you heard of it? And they've heard of it, but they haven't really thought much about it until, recent news that really blew up about the privacy regulations. And there's a lot also touching base on the national security law, but I'm not going to touch on that. But actually, in more feasible, realistic business pinpoint of view, we're now seeing a lot of virtual bank accounts that are numberless. So, or even you can actually customize the numbers to your liking. So this actually really resonates to a lot of other fields as well. If we look into why consumers are now seeking to take back control of the data that they give and also the privacy that they want. And I look a lot into retail, especially into retail technology and unmanned stores. Some people think, it's pretty cool. Asia is at the forefront of this. China is the king of unmanned stores, etc. But actually, with Hong Kong being such a private market, would we be open to this Break Brother style? Actually, no. This is why we've actually seen a lot more of innovative checkout solutions that exempts the whole facial or biometric data recognition, but really stripping back to using other forms of technology, be it AI and image recognition and such. So just to clarify, it was more about how our desire to take back control of our data, looking for more private solutions, has really helped shape businesses into shaping their products and services to also fulfill the demand of these new consumers, especially with Gen Zs, you could also see.
Yeah, fascinating. And it reminds me when you were talking there of there was a couple of news stories about in the Hong Kong protests, a lot of the ways people were fighting technologies, and some of those behaviors, street protests were echoed in some of the BLM protests in the US, right? So activists looking around the world, not just consumers, but activists, right, looking around the world. And of course, as you say, that's going to feed back into how businesses use technologies and treat technologies. Super interesting. Lydia, over to you. This is, just because we'll come back to Asia in a moment, but yeah, can you share any LATAM trends? Because obviously that's a large part of your focus, and perhaps some of the more cultural trends that you focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot going on in here with the very polarized politics that we have going on. And obviously private corporations play a big part in that as well. So it's inevitable to kind of detach one from the other. But one thing that is great about being in Brazil right now is that there's a lot of cultural movements happening that are starting from people themselves. And then brands are really just struggling to catch on. So I'm just going to say something here, and hopefully brands can hear and kind of tap on that. So there's a huge gap in terms of the economy, but also in terms of education in Brazil. Very few people have access to high-end education and universities in general. One thing that we're seeing is a lot of people from marginalized communities are using YouTube and Instagram, their personal platforms, to go to the university, learn whatever they can, and then share that back with people, the public, but in a very informal, very approachable language, in a way that they can also mix references from culture like Brazilian funk music, or just very slangs or things like that, so that they can kind of translate that content that comes in a very formal academic way to the people that they live with, because they just see the importance of getting that education and want to democratize it to their communities, groups, families, friends, etc. So that is really, really taking off. There are many amazing people who are leading the way, and brands have a big opportunity here to kind of be a part of that if they want to.
Super interesting. And Nia, over to you just to wrap up this. Yeah, what can you think of a non-obvious trend that you have really been privileged to spot very because it exists, as you say, whether it's in Singapore, Indonesia, or just your demographic, which you felt you really had an edge on seeing earlier than the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think on hindsight, there's a lot of trends that actually emerged first in China, and then it sort of diffused to Southeast Asia and then to the rest of the world. Just citing some examples like live streaming. I mean, we saw like the Pearl Bro who made like $4 million just opening up muscles back in 2016, and then now, only now, people are talking about live streaming in the West, and now it's even accelerated because of the pandemic. But I think another thing that's still quite new, quite emerging in the West is also all this talk about how we call this trend in trend watching business as social, how the power that a brand can have if a brand were to build communities around its fans, around its audience. But to be honest, business as social is not really a trend in Southeast Asia. Like, business has always been social. It has always been about community. And we have this thing in Indonesia that we call arisan, which is like a group of female, usually housewives. They gather together like weekly to just chat, and then through that, commerce also takes place. And similar things also, similar societies like that also are present in India and other Southeast Asian countries. And then now businesses are starting to sort of leverage that more in recent years, but I'm seeing more and more examples from the West of how business as social as a concept is now taking on, and brands are starting to leverage that as well.
Fascinating. And Lydia, I think I remember doing some work in Latin America some years ago and seeing similar trends, right, where especially lower income consumers, almost hijacking social media in order to, co-opt some of the same things that Nia was talking about there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we in countries, especially in the global South, where resources are so scarce, where private companies don't pay enough attention to people and consumers, and where governments neglect their citizens, people are really taking on to their own hands to do things and make things themselves. So they help each other. They will figure things out, and they'll find ways that are traditional to make things happen.
So some super interesting. Well, we could talk about trends all day, but I also, and we'll certainly come back to some future trends and future other trend watchers. But I just wanted to go back to something that Nia said in her introduction, which was really about, sometimes going to events and feeling like you're, either the only millennial, only Asian, or only female speaker, or all of the above. Now, Lydia, I know you've done a lot of work around trying to raise the profile of, more diverse speakers. I'm just curious, one of the reasons, how do you see the industry? Do you think it's improving? And I guess, if you could wave a magic wand, how can we, solve this issue, if you like? How can we, move this forward? Because I know all of you do a lot of speaking and have been extremely competent with it, but clearly we've still got some way to go. So I'd love to hear kind of your reflections on that, and maybe opening with you, Lydia, because maybe to perhaps just tell the audience about, some of the efforts that you're doing, because I know about it, but it's, definitely deserves a wider platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I forgot to mention Future Resources when I was introducing myself. So Future Resources is a platform. It's open for whoever wants to look at it, but also collaborate and write and add things to it. It's basically a Google Sheets open to anyone, and it has different tabs. A tab for events, a tab for knowledge, in which you can have a list of like books, podcasts, newsletters, websites in general. A tab for people, so other women and non-binary people who are in the forecasting, strategy, research industries that just want to leave their details in there and hopefully work together someday. A highlights tab, so that's where we highlight pioneering women in trend forecasting who have led the way. And also communities tab, so a curation of communities related to these industries that you can kind of tap on. So that's kind of one way to kind of bring more attention and awareness to either topics that are that touch on race, on class, on sustainability, on gender, and futures in general across all industries, and also to the people who are either interested in doing something different, and others who have been doing this all along. So that's super cool. Go check it out. And something else, just to answer your question, Henry, one thing that I think that we can change this is, and I've noticed this recently in Brazil a lot of white upper class men have been giving their Instagram or Twitter platforms, lending it to Black women for a week or for a day or whatever. Now, that might seem like a nice initiative, but in the end, it's just really one way to just, for people to tap them on the shoulder and be like, oh yeah, you are anti-racist. Oh yeah, you are a feminist. So it's just really all about them in the end. So it's just not the way to go. And I've seen people from like comedians to trend forecasters doing this in Brazil. So it's really not how we should be approaching this. I think what should be radical and would actually work is for these men to, you know, exit social media altogether. As long as they're there, as long as they're using their voice, which is the only thing that they can give up, then they're not doing anything.
Challenging, challenging provocation. Interesting. Okay. Nia, you were the one who raised this. Like, you know, I'd love to hear more about, you know, how you see the future of this industry, and how, as you say, do you agree with what Lydia's saying, you know, and how are you seeing in certainly in Asian events or the Asian marketplace, you know, how is this dynamic playing out?
I think it's quite a tough question to answer, right? Because there are different like layers to it. I think firstly, the trend or the future industry is a very small and niche industry, which I don't think is actually quite recognized in Asia. Like it will take me ages to explain to others what I'm doing, because they will think, oh, are you like a market researcher, but just qualitative, not quantitative? So is it like, is TrendWatching like Euromonitor, like Kantar? So what is it actually? So I think there's the awareness problem. So how could you even, like, you know, attract diverse people if people don't even know about what it is? And it's also, I mean, the trends industry is a very like Western thing as well. So there is that. And then when it comes to speaking at conferences in APAC, of course, we live in a region where hierarchy, or even like how old you are, like who you are, this thing still matters. So that's why I often am the only like female, the only millennial speaker, and people would sort of like try to judge, try to figure out who am I, how old I am. So I think there's that factor as well, regardless of industry. So I think the first thing that we need to do is to introduce more about what this thing is actually about, which is why right now at TrendWatching, what I'm currently working on is to build an online course academy. And what we try to do with this product is to make the price point as accessible as possible, because yes, it's a global product, but even though it's priced relatively affordable from a Western point of view, it still costs quite a lot in the APAC market. But that's what we're trying to do to make it more inclusive, at least giving more access to more people in this side of the world.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you think there's kind of a bit of a supply and demand issue as well, in that, you know, that right now there isn't the depth of there just aren't enough people in the industry, right, as you say, in Asia. And I guess that's why it's so important that, you know, resources like Lydia's, right, to celebrate and to show people, both to conference organizers or potential clients, but also to people thinking about whether they could get into this industry, right? You know, there's so much talk about, you know, you can only become what you can see, right? So the more visible younger female trend watchers, you know, innovation consultants, however you describe it, you know, cultural analysts are, you know, the more people will see it as a viable career option.
Yeah.
Tiffany, over to you, because I guess, you know, I know we had a discussion kind of when, you know, when I was inviting you to be part of this, because I guess you don't explicitly market yourself as a kind of a futures, you know, a trend person, right? You're more of a retail tech analyst. Do you find that industry focus specialized? I mean, I think you talk about the future because, as you say, like Chinese retail, you know, especially in the digital space, is the world of the future. But do you have a different perspective? Do you think your industry focus and technological focus negates some of this, or takes you out of this kind of sphere of trends being traditionally a kind of, you know, a white male Northwest Europe, US field?
Right. So my first job was a retail analyst with Essential, also same group as Lydia, actually. And as I started, the directors started bringing me to conferences and such, and I realized as the junior, I was the only Asian in a room full of older white men who were very experienced in the industry, nonetheless, on the stage speaking. I remember there was this one time I was also invited to a corporate Chatham House Rules meeting, and some people just assumed I was the assistant when in fact I had actually invited the director to be my plus one to the event and such. There are lots of, I don't want to say obstacles as such, but it is a bit harder, especially I'm 5 foot. When I was working in London, the only Asian minority in a room as well. And the retail industry is very full of, it's a very male dominant industry actually. And I started taking a look at why these men had a lot more of a voice than I did. You know, I was also posting the same content, I was talking about the same things, and just why couldn't I just create my own platform? So a lot of people, they would have that platform to support them and whatnot. So I decided I was looking for ways to stand out more. So I started realizing if people were going out to take photos of their stores and talk about it, and I was doing the same, why not find a different medium? So I started filming. So whenever I went traveling, which I loved to do pre-pandemic, I would actually start filming all these innovative stores that I would go to. Like my partner then at that time, like a whole travel itinerary was just me going to stores, the newest stores that open, and I would constantly just film them and talk about them. And I think that really started gaining exposure of what I was doing. And it really helped me and led me to where I am today with a lot of more recognition and exposure and publications. And actually, I'm really grateful because a lot of other younger female candidates, they also started approaching me and telling me I've really inspired them to also speak out a bit more and try out different mediums and do more sharing of their content. I mean, LinkedIn now is very different to how it was 2 years ago. We play a lot with algorithms and people try really hard to get their content across as well. But I'm very grateful for how I started out with the videos, and I hope to continue and also inspire other millennials like me who are able to create their own platform and opportunity to have a voice.
Yeah, and if anyone hasn't seen Tiffany's Retail Patrol videos, they're absolutely awesome. They certainly inspired me and us at TrendWatching. So thanks for sharing them, and that, you know, they are genuinely great. So check out Tiffany on LinkedIn or on Twitter, right, is your preferred platforms now?
LinkedIn, yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn, whichever.
And your Forbes columns. But yeah, so just going back to you know, some of the issues that have been raised there. I mean, you know, there's a lot of discussion around, you know, when it comes to how to give people a voice in the room, whether it's kind of you know, if you like, the heart or the head that you should appeal to, right? The people in positions of power. I mean, I just find this crazy, right? If you just look at the numbers and you think about where the markets are headed, you know, whether it was, you know, social media 5-10 years ago, right, you know, that became the kind of advertising behemoths that just destroyed the rest of the market, you know, and that was obviously being used more by younger people, often by, you know, female, you know, users, and it just strikes me. I mean, when you guys, you know, have found yourselves in these kind of, you know, isolated positions at events, you know, to think about, like, when you try and make the case, is it by, you know, talking about the trends that your demographic are living and just trying to, you know, show people that ultimately they need to have people like you on stage because you are their future customer, right? And you are talking about trends that are, you know, if they're not aware of them, are going to steamroller their business? Or, you know, do you think it is, I guess, like, what's, you know, the other you know, dimension is kind of, you know, thinking about, and I think it's a really important effort that Rohit's doing with this diversity summit. But, you know, I've seen some pushback against people kind of resisting, you know, the pressure basically to have, you know, not to have all male panels, and, you know, talk about, you know, female tokenism in panels, you know, which to me feels, you know, quite offensive. And I know, Lydia, you've been doing, as I said, a lot of work on, you know, highlighting that this doesn't have to be tokenism. There's many brilliant people. I guess, like, you know, have you had these conversations with organizers, or do you feel that the people who are booking you are kind of already and Lydia, I know you raised the issue of kind of performative allyship, but like, I guess like how do you navigate through this world, or do you just feel that you have to just keep on plugging away, doing what you're doing, and wait for the market to catch up? I mean, it's a very challenging question to answer. And how do you think about these how to push the industry forward? Nia, you talked about the academy that you're trying to do to bring people through, but Lydia, beyond future resources, what other efforts do you think you or more to the point, people on the other side of the table could take?
I think it's like a mix of a bunch of things that need to happen in order for such a big thing like this to change systemically. I think women or underrepresented groups of people, they can find strength in unity. So one thing that I'm seeing that really works, and it's great in itself, is mentorship, or just talking to each other. Really, it doesn't have to be hierarchical. It can just be like, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. Can you spare me 30 minutes? That in itself is already great. You can introduce your industry, your work, what you do, and it's amazing. And I think it's less of like giving a formula of how to get to a place, but more like exposing your perspective or your journey so far, so that the person can make the decisions themselves on how they want to take on their advice and career, etc. I think when trying to get more attention from events organizers, for example, one thing that someone could do is just really lean on their work and the quality of their work. So not, too much self-promotion, but eventually, yes, put out the work that you do and your own opinion and analysis and your take on things, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for authentic people who have a unique perspective on things. They don't just want someone else who's going to repeat something that's already been said. So if you have your own work and you have your own opinion, put it out there. That's kind of, you can get some people to see you and be interested in your work. And eventually, when you have the platform and the visibility to speak, that's when you attack. And that's when you say, like, listen to me, this is important. And just being there is a political act in itself, because you're not supposed to be there because you're a woman, or because you're from the global south, or because you're whatever it is. So there's always going to be so many barriers. The fact that you are taking the place of a white, upper class, heterosexual man in itself is such a huge conquest.
And that's a really interesting point you said there about, like, the idea of kind of, when you're there, then you can attack. And I think that's something that people really struggle with, right? When it comes to diversity, is diversity creates friction, right? Because you are by definition introducing alternative perspectives. So, and I think, that's one of the discussions that, over the past generation, right? Of how much should, an outsider, right? And I use that word in inverted commas, kind of soften those edges, right, and make people comfortable, and kind of come into a world and say, right, well, now I'll morph myself to and adapt myself to make everyone not feel too uncomfortable, right? But how much there do you think you lose in terms of actually creating and sharing authentic insights, right, about your demographic, your perspective, and when you guys think about how you've worked with people, I know you've all worked, both conferences and also, kind of brand strategy, consultancy projects. Do you kind of try and strike a balance of, like, coming in softly, and as you say, then Lydia, attacking a bit more, or do you feel that do you try and self-select with clients and say you actually look for clients that can handle this discomfort? What are the kind of some of the strategies that you have adopted there? Maybe Lydia, just to continue with you, and then we'll go to Tiffany and Nia afterwards.
Sure. I think if you are in the market already, you are already not a radical. You're not, a full-time activist. So that's fine. And you need to have that kind of balance in order for your content or your message to get across. So there needs to be some sort of balancing there in how you're going to deliver the message. Otherwise, if you just attack in a very, violent way, then the message is not going to get across. So yeah, you definitely need to kind of know how to say and know the people you need to work with in order to change things, even if it's a little bit more discreet at the beginning.
Tiffany, over to you. Maybe is this something that you've experienced, and do you have kind of ways of coming in softly, or do you just say, look, this is happening on the ground in China in the retail sector? Like, is it a terror strategy for you? You guys need to keep up.
Well, what Lydia said was quite inspiring. Attack in some way, but I would say just show up and just do it. Without asking for validation, just prove yourself. So, I mean, like I mentioned, when I used to go to conferences, it's just a lot of white male, and they would always be on stage telling me what millennials are like when they're like in their 40s or their 50s. And I'm just so flustered. I just don't understand why they have the chance to be on the stage to tell me, to basically speak about what reports they've read. So once I was given a conference slot, somebody asked me to talk about millennials. So what better way than just me? I invited 16 Gen Z on stage. I mean, I had to pay them to get them out of their beds to participate. But basically, I did a whole live Q&A panel. So I told the audience, all these CEO and delegates, I'm like, if you want to know your millennials, go out there, speak to them. This isn't just your kid's slumber party. This is your real chance to speak to your customers. And I really brought and deliver these millennial and Gen Zs on stage. So I'm always finding ways to do different style of content to really attract people's attention. That's why I said, maybe it's Lydia's way of attack in this sense, but just show up, just do it, and just prove yourself and what you can do.
Awesome. Nia, any further thoughts? I mean, I know you guys have all proved yourselves again and again and again, but any further thoughts from you on that?
I think, yeah, what Lydia and Tiffany had said, I agree with some of them. I think I just have to, when I speak at conferences or for clients the audience are usually mostly white, older male, I would just present my best. And then when I came off of the stage, sometimes I actually hear some of the most surprising comments and remarks, and sometimes they're actually good. Like, I just take everything as a compliment. Sometimes people say, like, who found you? Like, where do you come from? And things like that. I mean, of course, they're saying that I'm not their typical like profile, but I think to me, I just take it, I'm celebrating myself. I did a good job. And I'm proving to them that, people like us, we also deserve the stage. Our voices can be heard as well.
Yeah, and I think that's as you say, just showing up and sharing your insights, and there will be people who react against that, but kind of screw them, right? Because the truth is, you're on the right side of history. But talking about just picking up with something you said there, who found you, right? Which is kind of a horrific response to have, but like, let's just run with that for a second in a more positive way. Let's twist that, as you say. Let's try and be optimistic about everything. We've spoken a lot about celebrating others, bringing other people into a conversation. So perhaps before we close, there's so many useful insights, and you guys, as I said, have just consistently shown up in every time I've worked with any of you. It's been, a true pleasure. And I know you guys are some of the hardest working people. Like, Lydia, you talked about social. You guys are absolutely mastering social in terms of, sharing just really high quality on the ground insights, which I love to keep reading. So I'd urge everyone watching this to follow, stay in touch with all of you. And now's an opportunity to kind of pay it forward. And before we close, I'd love for you guys to share who are some of the most exciting commentators, whether that's Gen Z, Tiffany, you spoke about. It doesn't always have to be about Gen Z, but it could be, alternative, underrepresented groups. Who do you look to as, pushing you out of your comfort zone and thinking about bringing great insights that you're excited to read? Because that is kind of gold dust for everyone on the call as well. So maybe Tiffany, to start with you, who's your top kind of emerging futurist at the moment, or a couple?
So there was this girl that reached out to me on LinkedIn telling me she loves what I do, invited me for a cup of coffee. We became really great friends in the end. Her name is Esther Kroes. So she's a Dutch Jewish Londoner, and I've just watched her grow over the past year because she's part of this 2040 leadership organization, but she also founded this thing called O34 Gallery, where she creates a lot of female artists. She's one of the most proudest feminist activist I know as well, and she's really hardworking in her ethics and becoming the next generation of a thought leader.
So is that Esther Kroes, was that, and 044
Yes.
Gallery?
034
Gallery.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, we'll check her out. Everyone, make sure. Nia, over to you. Who is kind of, you know, who do you watch and admire?
I actually have two that maybe I'll share with you. One, she's not really a futurist. I don't think she positioned herself as a futurist, but she covers the China market quite extensively. Her name is Ashley Duder-Rennock. I saw her first at a conference for APAC speakers, and she was there, and I really like her energy and her content. So that's one. And then the other one, I think, coming more from a perspective, me as a young Indonesian, I really admire the founder of Gojek, who's now our education minister. His name is Nadiem Makarim, because I think he's not a futurist, but he can see the future, and he can see how to solve real problems in Indonesia and made something really big out of it that inspires the whole world. It doesn't just stay within Indonesia. Now everybody knows Gojek, and now he's brave enough to step into another role that's super different in the government to make a change in education. So I really admire him in that way.
Fantastic. And Lydia, over to you finally.
I think one of my favorite people are Leah Thomas, and you can find her as her handle is Green Girl Leah. She is an activist. She's a Black American Gen Z who talks about intersectional environmentalism. So she basically stands for everything that I love and, you know, read about and try to build every day. And she's on the forefront of like building that in the present and changing people's minds and working with Gen Zs, but also older people on how to push those agendas forward. And other than that, there's just amazing women everywhere. You can check out Future Resources for a full list, but some of my favorites are Ada Paris in the UK. In Brazil, there's Rosa Alegria. There's also Monique Avel and Jamila Ribeiro, who are not futurists necessarily, but they're just amazing. You just have to follow them and read what they say.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining us from literally all over the world, from Hong Kong, from Singapore, from Brazil, and I'm sitting here in London. It's been such a delight to speak with you. And just want to finally close by saying, you know, exactly these kind of conversations are what me and Rohit are having at the moment as we work on a new book, The Future Normal, which is really celebrating the ideas and instigators who are building a fairer, healthier, greener future for us all. And one of the things that we are trying to do with this is go beyond the obvious, right? Go beyond the kind of Silicon Valley, the Teslas and the Impossible Burgers that everyone's read about, and pick out some of the global entrepreneurs that are building game-changing startups like Nia spoke about, things like Gojek, right? What is the next mobility platform coming out of Southeast Asia, which in the end is going to reshape the next decade for people globally? So do sign up to be alerted with weekly chapters on that. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, real fun to speak to you. And if any of you guys are looking for speakers or advisors and to get beyond your comfort zone, then do check out Lydia's Future Resources or speak to Tiffany and Nia or Lydia themselves personally, because I can testify, having worked with all of them, they are all absolutely awesome. And if they can't help you, they will certainly know someone who can. So thank you very much. And that is us signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye.